All right, good morning once again. Hey, we are in week 3 of a series, Be Rich. And so if you missed the last couple of weeks, I want to encourage you to watch online. You can grab a CD. I don't know if there's any left out there, but there's CDs on the go out across from the check-in counter where the preschool is. You can grab one. We've been working through. We had fun in week 1. We learned some crazy friends that I have that are rich. And then we found out they were you. And they were the crazy rich friends that we had and doing all kinds of silly things. Last week we talked about being generous in what God has richly blessed us with. Today we're going to talk about doing good, right? Because we want to be above average do-gooders. Any above average do-gooders here? This is going to be a long series, all right? We're going to keep on keeping on until everyone's above average do-gooders. So I got good news, bad news. What do you want first? Bad news. Yeah, just watch the news. There's bad news. Here's the good news. You are rich. You don't feel it, do you? Week 5. Here's in your outline, top of your outline. Take a look at it. Here it is. If you make $34,000 a year, you are in the top 1% wage earners in the world. If you make $80,000 a year, you are in the top 0.1% wage earners in the world. I know you're rich, you don't feel like it. Week 5, we'll talk about that, but we are rich. But here is our struggle. We had a little fun with it last week. We're going to up it again this week. When our kids are small, when my kids are small, we'd go to the pizza parlor and they would play games and they would win tickets. Everybody know what these are like, right? And they would win all the tickets. And then they would go to the counter and they'd run it through the little counter thing and they'd have, 9,875. And then they would look on the board. It's like, what do I get, Dad? And then they look on the board and they're like, oh, I always wanted one of those. I've been praying in the name of Jesus for it. And finally, God has blessed me. I get one, right? And you're like, oh, great. That's nice. That's wonderful. And they're ecstatic about it. And all the way home in the back of the car, right? And you're driving like that. You keep both hands on the wheel. You're trying to reach it, right? And then all of a sudden, the little toy breaks. All of a sudden, how much fun is that? And all of a sudden, it magically disappears. How does that happen? A few weeks later, go back to the pizza parlor, play the games. Oh, 12,000, Dad. This is going to be, my life is going to change. I'm going to be able to. And they look on the board, they go, oh, I always wanted one of those. Oh, my life is going to be so rich now, Dad. And all the way home, right? And you're doing this again, right? And then it magically disappears. Right? How does that happen? It's a different message. But here's what's funny about adults. We sit here and we realize, knowing how much fun's that? We recognize that in probably a day or less, that's no longer going to be fun. It's going to be in the corner, and they're going to be off looking for something else to bring them that joy or happiness in their life. And as adults, we sit here and we go, we know that. We know walking up to the counter and we're looking at those things, we're like, I just spent like $900 for a, right? Whoop-de-doo, and we recognize that as adults. But what we don't recognize as adults is that we exchange these for dollar bills. And we think that if we can just get enough of these, that all of a sudden everything will be fine. And then we get enough of these, and we go out, and for 85 easy payments, we can buy and we get it, we get in it, and we drive it, we wear it, we whatever we do with it, and we recognize it's not going to bring us any joy. All of a sudden, you look in the back seat of that new 85 easy monthly payments, and you look in the back seat and you see a big old pile of. You got kids, I know. I looked in the back seat during service. Next week we're going to start auto detailing. A power washer and a blower. And we recognize that as adults, that kids do that, but when it comes to us, we don't recognize that. And here's what's interesting for all of us to grab a hold of in your outline, and this is the kind of the key thought that we're fighting against, is the struggle that we all have, every single one of us in here, is that we can easily put our hope and trust in money, not God. And that's the bad news. In fact, here's the reality. The richer you are, the easier it is to transition to trust in your stuff than it is to trust in the one who's the provider of your stuff. And it just, all of a sudden, your heart begins to shift, and you begin to put your hope and your trust in the provisions that the provider has given, and you subtract out the provider in it. And you think, if I just get enough stacks, if I just make it big enough, that my life is going to be perfect. And yet we sit here as adults and we all recognize you can buy whatever it is that you think is going to make your life better. It may make your life more convenient in certain areas, but the reality is your life and the quality of your life is not better. It's just you have a new whatever it is. In fact, in many cases, it becomes worse because now you got the stress of a payment. Right? So Paul writes to Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. And this is the series passage that we're going to keep unfolding as we go through the next few weeks as well. So Paul writes Timothy. Timothy is Paul's understudy. Paul wants to basically have Timothy be a leader of the New Testament church, and he is instructing him, so he writes 1 and 2 Timothy to him to give him some encouragement. And basically he says this to Timothy. Timothy, in your life, you're going to run up against people who are believers in Jesus Christ, and they're rich. And the temptation that they're going to have is they're going to be arrogant in their riches. They're going to think they're smarter, they're better, they're whatever than everyone else. And they're going to put all of their hope in their stuff. And it's crazy. Because why would you trust your stuff when you can trust the one who provided it for you? And so he says, when you come across those people, here's what I want you to do. I want you to change the direction of their heart. And if you're going to change the direction of their heart, there's two things that they got to do. They got to be generous in what they give, and they need to be do-gooders in the sense of deeds, which is what we're going to talk about today. And so look with me in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. He says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. So why would you trust your stuff when you can trust the one who gives you the stuff? But put their hope in God, who richly provides everything for our enjoyment. It's not wrong having a nice house and a nice car and nice clothes and nice stuff. There's anything wrong with it. In fact, if God has blessed you with it and you can afford it, go for it, do it. But don't put your trust in your stuff. That's the point. If you got a nice whatever it is, hey, God bless you, good for you. But don't trust it to be your provider for you. Trust the one who's provided it for you. In verse 18, he says, command. So that is the idea of an instruction. It's not like, hey, if you run across believers, just kind of go, hey, you're rich. You ought to do some nice things with your stuff. It's like a command. So he says, command them to do what? To do good, right? To do good and to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share, which is the part we looked at last week. So today we want to camp out on the deeds of doing good. Right? So we want to be good at being rich, and we want to be good at doing good deeds, because we don't want to be average do-gooders. We want to be above average do-gooders in our life. And so we said this at the very beginning. God has blessed me, in your outline, God has blessed me with more than I need. Any amens to that? All right? I am rich. I will not trust in my riches, but in him who richly provides. Because I have more, I will give more, and I will do more. Okay? So this is kind of, I'm not going to apologize. This is a little bit in your face. Hey, listen, you're rich. Give more and do more. And if you want your heart to shift from trusting in your stuff, that's how you're going to do it. You're going to have it where you're going to give more and you're going to do more in life. Now, before we get into deeds, let me give you this thought, and then we're going to plow through and give you 3 principles. In your outline, you are not saved by good works, but you are saved for good works. Okay, I don't want anybody going home going, so that means if I just do like good things that I get to go to heaven. No. You get to heaven by a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Okay? He comes into your life, and because he is in your life, you ought to want to do good deeds. You following me on that? Yes. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 says this, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of yourself, it is a gift of God." Verse 9, "Not by works, so that no one can boast." So you don't have a right going around going, "I'm going to heaven, you're not." Okay? Because if you're going to heaven, it's only because of God's grace in your life. You didn't earn it, you didn't buy it, you didn't deserve it. You with me? Yeah. Verse 10, "For we are God's handiwork," some translations say workmanship, "created in Christ Jesus to do good works." So we enter into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. His grace pursues us, showers us in our life. Our heart is transformed, and God says, now you're going to stay on this place called planet Earth for a time, and in the meantime, I want you to do good works. I want you to be the light of the world. I want you to be the salt of the world, which God has prepared in advance for you to do. And so this is kind of a wild thought fact in this verse. That not only does God save us by his grace, but he doesn't frustrate us. He gives us a purpose, and he gives us the skill set to do and fulfill his purpose. All right? So you are here to do good works. Are you with me? You're not saved by them, but you're saved for them. All right, so let me give you 3 principles when it comes to doing good works. 2 are theological, 1 is kind of just a personal observation. So you ready? All right. Number 1 in your outline, my good works should point to God, never to me. Okay? When you do good works, do-gooders, above average do-gooders, it should never point to you. You should never do anything for Jesus Christ to get your name on anything. You ought to be grateful that his name is on you. Right? And that's it. And so you're doing it because of his grace and his love in your life. That's it, period. And so we need to make sure that we recognize that. Now look with me in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 and following. So Jesus is speaking, and he's going to give all believers a job description. This is, there's the written will of God, and then there's what we call the unwritten will of God. The written will of God is pertaining for all of us, then the unwritten will of God is specifically for you. All right? So this is for all of us, regardless of what he individually calls us to do. In verse 14, he says this. He says, "You are the light of the world." That is our job description. That as believers in Jesus Christ, we are the light of the world. And then he's going to go on and he's going to explain that, or give us 2 illustrations as to what that means. And so he goes on and in the verse and he says this, "A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." If you've ever driven on 5 or 80 and it's all country, and all of a sudden you come up over a hill and you look down and you see a city or a town in the horizon, you see the lights, the street lights and all the different lights, and it illuminates into the skies if it's evening time. And it's like, oh, we're almost there, right? So he says, listen, the city on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. So you don't turn on your lamp and then put something around it so that it doesn't illuminate the room. No one does that. And he says, so you're not going to do that. He says instead he puts the lamp, he puts it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Okay? The written will of God for believers is that we are to be the light of the world. Okay? The illustration is, you're like a city on a hill. You're illuminating a dark area. You're bringing light into an area that is dark. It's like a lamp on a stand. Someone puts a lamp on a stand, and that light illuminates it for everyone. Verse 16, and this is the clarification part of it. In the same way as what? In the same way as a city on a hill, in the same way as a lamp on a stand. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may, what's the word? Not hear. The world, and this is a guy that makes a living communicating, the world doesn't need another sermon. Your friends don't need another sermon. Reality is, guy makes a living doing it, you don't need another sermon. They need to see your actions. And that's what it is, right? That they would see your good deeds. And when they see your good deeds, what are they going to do with those good deeds that they see? They're going to glorify your Father who's in heaven. Our good deeds ought to glorify God, not ourselves. It ought to glorify our Father. If you were to take the New Testament and you were to say, in one word, what are we as believers to do? We are to influence our world for Jesus Christ. And it's not a message. It's not more sermons. It's not more Christian books. It's not more guys on the radio. It's action. It's action. It's action that draws attention to it. And our actions are really sermons in motion, isn't it? We're living it out. We're doers of the word. We're not just simply hearers of the word. And so when we think of the body of Christ, we are to be that of a beautiful picture of Christ. In fact, if you look at the verses, a couple of words in that text, the word you, in verse 14, the word you is plural in the Greek. It's not singular. It means you. It means you, the church. You are the light. You are the light, right? And then if you go back to verse 16, the word good deeds means beautiful in appearance, attractive in action. Great? That's what it's to be. Not a message. Not like, oh, that guy's funny. Ha, 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 ha. He's like a clown. Right? It's action. It's action where they actually see it in their life. Look with me in your outline here, right below the passage. Letting our light shine before men allows them to see our good works, and then this is the important part, the beauty of the Lord, the Lord has worked in us. Because we have a personal relationship with Christ, we do things to glorify Him. And our actions ought to be a picture of His love to us. The world desperately needs that. The world needs to see actions, not necessarily words. You with me? Any good do-gooders here today? Number 2. Second one is more kind of just personal observation and philosophy, not necessarily theologically. Here's this. My good deeds must help others in a way they need it, not in the way that I want to give it. Okay? Now again, this isn't dealing with people who, are needy and are constantly using people to get their stuff. That isn't what that's about. This is about people who have truly found themselves on hardships. Okay? So let me give you an example. If someone has lost their job and they're in a situation where, man, they just can't even put food on the table, the refrigerator's completely empty and all that stuff, it's probably not a good time to recommend that you want to donate your couch to them. Now, it may make you feel good that you're giving them a couch that you don't want anymore to them, but they're probably in need of resources for food, right? See, the temptation is when we see that someone's in need, we want to try to meet their need the way that we would feel good about it. And you have to be cautious about that. You need to make sure that you find out what is their need. And then how can we meet those needs in a way not to bring glory to ourselves, but can truly help them. Another thing that you have to be cautious of is sometimes when we find families, and we're just a few months away for Christmas, right? We find families in need, we want to get them really cool gifts for their kids. But it may not be practical. So buying them, an iPhone 7 that's waterproof, That's a joke. You should have been here in week 1, right? If they can't afford food, be honest, they're not going to be able to afford a data plan for it, right? And so you just have to think about what is it that we can give to them that's going to be helpful for them. Now let me share one other thing, and this is I think incredibly huge. When a family is in need, again, we're getting close to Christmas, when a family is in need and mom and dad or mom or dad or whichever the case may be are unable to provide Christmas gifts for their kids, sometimes we want to ride in as the knight in shining armor, and we want to give them lavish gifts. And we want to give it to the kids. And here's what I would say to you. Let mom and dad be the hero. Give it to them. Because mom and dad already feel bad enough that they can't provide for their kids. We don't need to let dad sit in the corner or mom sit in the corner as you ride in on your white stallion, giving them all the cool gifts that you think would be cool to give them. Give them to mom and dad. Let them be the heroes. And if no one recognizes you, no one gives you any kudos, that's the point. That's the point. If you're doing it to get your name on a plaque, let me just help you out. Save your money. Spend it on yourself. Right? And so when we do that, think through it. I think oftentimes in our life, if we've never been in a financial hardship, we don't realize that the pain that it is. They're grateful that their kids have it, but there's pain that they weren't the one who provided it. And with the white stallion thing and, hey, I got you all the cool things and whatever, give it to mom and dad. Let them be the heroes and you move on. You with me? And we've all heard where Jesus talked about going the extra mile. You hear that? So when it comes to our good deeds and it comes to helping out other people, go the extra mile, okay? And let me give you a little thing, because most people have no idea where that comes from. So Jesus is talking, it was at Matthew chapter 5, verse 41. Jesus is talking and he says this. He says to the believers, says, if anyone asks you, or if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them a 2nd mile, okay? So let me just kind of share what that means to go the extra mile. It means that in the Roman government, if you were a peasant, a common person, and a Roman guard were to come up to you, or somebody in the Roman government were to come up to you, and they had a pile of stuff, and they looked at you and they said, you, and that's why we use the word force, you are forced to carry. You had no right to decline. You couldn't say, I'm old, I got a bad back, I'm this, I'm that, I'm going this way, you want to go that way. You had no right to say no. You were forced to walk. A Roman mile was 1,000 steps. Okay? You were forced to carry that person's stuff for 1,000 steps. Jesus says this to the believers. If they come to you and they say, carry it 1,000 steps, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go, I'd be happy to do that. Not only will I do that, I'll carry it another 1,000 steps. I'll carry it 2,000 steps for you. Right? That's what it is to go the extra mile in our life. And when we're thinking about good deeds to other people, go the extra mile. Take it. It's the whipped cream on the top. It's the cherry on the top. It's saying, hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm really thinking of you. And you're adding that little extra in there. Maybe you're bringing dinner over to them. Maybe you ran through the fast food line. Supersize it, right? Get them a little extra. Get them the dessert to go along with it. You say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Man, I'm really thinking of you. I want you to go the extra mile. If you're thinking of me, right, and you're thinking of like Cold Stone ice cream, don't think of 1 card. Think of 2 cards, right? And don't go cheap. Don't go 20. Go 50, right? I don't need ice cream. I'm just kidding. I do need it, but I don't need it, right? So, but you get the idea, right? It's one thing to give it, but give it a little extra. Give it a little bit more love. Go the extra mile to do it for them. You with me? Yes. Number 3. The third thing, back more into theology. Here we go. My good deeds will glorify God through, and this is important, His church. Remember, we are the ones who are going to carry light into the world. We are the you, the plural you. It's not us individually, but it is corporately. Oftentimes people will cite, pastors will say, the Bible says, do not forsake the gathering of believers, right? Some are in the habit of doing. And I think oftentimes we don't set the context of what that verse actually means. And so let me share with you what it means. So Hebrews is written to Jewish people who become believers. So they have the old Jewish law, the rituals and all the different sacrifices and so forth. And they came to Christ. But they weren't able to break free of the religion, of the sacrifices and all the ceremonial stuff. And as a result of it, they lived, and we would say in today's context, they were like stick in the mud. I mean, they had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, but when you looked at them, they didn't look like they had a personal relationship. They looked like sourpusses, right? They're sucking on lemons, and they don't even realize that Jesus is in their life, and He set them free. And so they're living real structured, real unsatisfied, real legalistic lives. Are you with me on that? You know anybody like that? Don't point at them. Do you know anybody like that? So here's what he says in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. He says this. He says, let us consider how we may, what's the word? I love that word, right? Because that is a country western word, isn't it? So I flash back to when I was a kid and I had a horse. And I had spurs. And I thought, what a great verse. So this is actually going to be a campaign we're going to do in the future. We're going to encourage people to wear their cowboy boots to church with their spurs, okay? Does everybody know what spurs are? Okay, you're not all city dwellers. So when my horse would get a little goofy on me, and he'd get a little bit of attitude, it was a barn burner, right? And it was just one step away from the glue factory. But anyway, so it'd get a little bit of an attitude, and you'd kind of yank on the reins, and you'd give him a little bit of action. You know what I'm saying? Like, you ain't the boss, I'm the boss, right? So this is what I'm thinking. What a great verse that is. So we could wear cowboy boots and spurs, and when you're sitting and singing and someone looks like they're not enjoying life, you could just reach over and you could just spur them, right? I mean, with that, how many want to show up for that? Right? Yeah, look at everybody. I'm wearing them next week. Next week, you're going to hear people come in, click, click, and they have the rattles of the little spurs in the back, right? No, that word doesn't mean that at all. It's actually a bad translation. It means to provoke, okay, or to encourage. So he says, let us consider how we may provoke or encourage, spur one another on toward what? Toward love and good deeds. It's interesting that when the Hebrew writer writes, he's saying when we come together as a corporate body, this isn't about getting, this is about giving. Right? This isn't about what you're going to get out of it. This is about what you're going to give. You're going to gather and you're going to provoke, you're going to encourage one another toward love and good deeds. Verse 25. Not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. In other words, there's some people in the body that have grown distant from God. They have become incredibly legalistic. They're sticks in the mud. They're not enjoying their salvation. They're not enjoying the Lord in their life. And they're in the habit of not meeting together. Now just pause. And this is an important part about attending, whether it be corporately or in community groups. When you do not attend and you're not involved in a community group, the temptation is you become an island to yourself. And when you pull away from a group, the natural tendency is to become legalistic and judgmental. And you'll run into people, I don't go to church anymore. They're all a bunch of hypocrites, right? And it's just a sign that they've pulled away. And this is what the Hebrew writer is saying. They become legalistic. They haven't divorced themselves from all the rules and all the regulations. They're not experiencing the joy of the salvation in their life because no one is spurring them on, encouraging them on to love and good deeds. That there's something about in a corporate body, whether it be in a large corporate setting or individually in a community group, that when we hear the stories about what God's doing in their life, it encourages us. When we hear how they served someone and how they did something, all of a sudden you go, man, that's cool. Maybe I'd like to try that. It encourages us. It spurs us on to love and good deeds. And so when we pull back, then what's going to end up happening is we end up getting where we are distant and we don't have that joy in our life. And so he says some of them are in the habit of doing that. But he goes on, he says, but encourage one another. It's about giving, not about getting in the corporate body. Okay? Now let me just do a little plug on this and then we're going to move on. On October 16th, we'll be starting a new campaign. It'll be a church-wide campaign called Reset. It's a very good study. It's going to be very practical in our life. So all of our community groups will be doing it. If you're in a community group, you will be doing the series Reset. Sunday morning messages will be on it. There's a book involved. If you are not in a community group, we want to encourage you to get into a community group. On the back of the communication card, there's a box there for a check to be involved in a community group. If you want to host the group, you can check that box as well. It is DVD driven. You're not going to be the teacher. You're going to put a DVD in there. You're going to hit play, and you're going to watch it. You're going to discuss the content of both the messages on Sunday and the DVD stuff, okay? Now, I say that to say this. If you want to be encouraged in your spiritual growth, community groups are a huge, huge, huge part of it. That is part of the spurring on to love and good deeds. Are you with me on that? And so it becomes important to do that. So make sure that you sign up. And again, if you're in a community group, you don't need to unless you want to host one. In your outline, moving on. I believe with all my heart, and actually Franklin Graham said this the other day, I'd already had my outline done, so he stole it from me. I believe with all my heart that through Christ, the local church is the hope of the world. When you look at the division that we have, when you look at the terrorism that we have, when you look at whatever's taking place in the United States and even the world, folks, another committee isn't going to fix it. More legislation isn't going to solve it, right? Jesus Christ is going to solve it. And we are to carry that light into the world. If you want to fix the problems are solved through Jesus Christ. We're all made by one Creator. We're all equal in His eyes, right? And we need to recognize that, and we need to allow Him to be Lord of not only our life, but our nation. And we have certainly pulled away from that. You agree with that? Acts chapter 4. In Acts chapter 4, the New Testament church got a grip of this. They understood that their trust was in their provider, not their provisions. And here's how they lived, and what would our world be if we were able to live this way? Here's a little description, and you can read Acts 2, 3, and 4 if you want. But here's a description of what took place. And God's grace was powerfully at work in them all. All of them were just being showered with God's grace. They recognized that they were so fortunate to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. They didn't earn it. They didn't deserve it. It was just His grace showering into his life. And verse 34, look what it says. That there were no needy persons among them. In fact, this is crazy. They recognized that their provider had given it to them, and we'll see this in a couple weeks. They were willing, in some cases, to sell their extra stuff just to help people who are in need. And what's interesting about that is that the world in Acts chapter 2 looked at the New Testament church, and this is what you got to get. They didn't know what they believed. In fact, the Romans thought the New Testament church were Jews. They didn't even know that they were followers of Christ. They didn't know what they believed. And they weren't known for what they were against. You know what they were known for? Their love. And their love was such a magnet to the community that people who had watched Jesus being crucified, people who had watched their friends throwing stones at the believers, you know what they said? I'm not sure that what we did was right. I'm not even sure what they believe or what they don't believe. But those people love each other. Our nation doesn't need another message. Our nation, our community, our homes need love. It needs action in our life. And Jesus said this. He said, "And they will know that you are my disciples by what you believe, by what you're against. They will know that you are my disciples by what? By what? By how you love each other. By how you love each other." So I think we need to be above average do-gooders. And we need to be generous, and we need to be generous in our actions of doing good for others, not for ourselves. And here's the pushback that we all have. The pushback is, I'm busy. We're all busy. I have so many things to do. I got 20 things on my plate. We all have 20 things on our plate. But because we're rich, we have a higher level of responsibility. And that's Paul's point to Timothy, that the believers who are rich in this present world, they have a higher level of responsibility to be above average do-gooders, to be generous, and to be kind in their action to other people. And so here's what I want to say. We had a church-wide project that we're still trying to figure out how to get it together. It ended up not working out. The funding was canceled for one of the organizations that we were going to serve. So we want to throw on a couple options to you. For doing good, okay, deeds. If you want to stop and talk to the folks at the Kaleidoscope, there's opportunities that they have where they take care of families who have been diagnosed with cancer, support food, different things. If you want to get involved in some of their stuff and do good for them, that would be incredible, and I would be very proud of you for doing that. If you want to do a project, and it's we're asking for 4 hours, a project to an organization or something in the community that you want to go out and do, we have 200 shirts that we printed up, and if you send me an email, tell me a little bit about what it is. I don't need to know a lot. I'm not going to fact check it. I'm just going to trust you on your word, all right? But if you send me a little email saying, hey, I did this for 4 hours, you let me know, and we'll get you a shirt, okay? Not that the shirts are extra cool, but just a way for us to say, hey, thank you for being above average do-gooders, all right? There's also, Pastor Dan, our children's pastor, had said that the Harvest Carnival, we're in need of folks to work. And so if you want to help out for that, that's probably going to be about a 4-hour project as well. If you want to help out with that, we'd be happy to accommodate you and give you a very cool t-shirt, okay? Now, here's what I almost did. I almost had a carpenter come in. You know the music group? No. I almost had a carpenter come in and build a runway, and I was going to model the shirt, right? But my back was hurting, and I wasn't going to be able to work it, so I had to just kind of put it down. So I'm getting old. So anyway, we want to help, but we want you to get a shirt and to do some good in our life, or in the lives of the community, all right? So one last thing, and Pastor Eric's going to come up. Last week we talked about giving to Kaleidoscope, all right? And we asked you to take an envelope, pray about it, and I trust that you have. And so it's going to give you an opportunity to do that. We'll still do it for the next couple weeks if you weren't here. Pastor Eric's going to share about a couple ways for you to give. So it is a great organization. We have a group in our church, the Impact Team, that vetted them out. They have like one part-time kind of a person. Almost every dollar that they get goes to families that have cancer and helping out and ministering to them. And so it's a great organization. Our goal is every year do this series. Maybe next year we'll have a couple organizations that we will be able to come alongside of. But my prayer is that we will bless them, that they will have a prosperous year, that they will be able to make a difference in the life of a family that hears just the C word is horrible for families. It's devastating. But if we can help them to bring a little hope into their homes, we want to do that. We want to be known, Laurel Ridge, we want to be known as we're rich, but we're not rich for ourselves. We're good at being rich. Amen. Pastor Eric's going to share, and we'll see you on the way out.
As we close with our service today, I wanted to share with you a couple of ways if God's leading you to give towards the Community Impact Project. There's a few ways that you can do that. And so on the purple sheet inside of your program, on one side there's some information about Kaleidoscope, who we'd like to really bless through this project. And on the reverse side of that has the instructions that are up on the screen that I want to go over with you real quick. So if you're feeling led to give towards the Community Impact Project, 3 ways that you can do that. 1, you can contribute online at laurelridgechurch.org/give, or you can just click on the giving tab up at the top of the webpage. Several of you are already giving to the church through that method. If you go there and do that, what you want to do is make sure that that use a little drop-down feature and select Community Impact Project. And then that'll highlight it for us. We'll know everything goes towards Kaleidoscope. If you want to give also to the church as well, you can do both of those categories. You can also give in person, and around you is a special envelope that has Give, Serve, Love on the outside of that envelope. If you put cash or check in this envelope, we'll know to designate that for the special Community Impact Project. And then finally, a new way we have is just to give by text. And so if you've got your mobile phone with you and you prefer just to do that, all you have to do is text to the number 925-293-9500, and that's on the screen. It's also in this in the instructions here on the in the program. And what you want to do is text a number, which would be the amount that you want to give, and the word impact. And that'll send it right to that designated spot for the Community Impact Project. So there's multiple ways that you guys can contribute if you're feeling led to do that. We want to encourage you in that. If you ever have any questions about it, please feel free to contact the church, where we'll be happy to help you out and make sure your gift goes to the right spot. Just a reminder, if you're giving to the Community Impact Project, the church does not keep a single penny of that. It's all going to go to Kaleidoscope to be a major blessing to them. And so as we're praying about how to worship through giving, even in this moment now, you can do that.